In November 2023, Sean "Diddy" Combs' ex-girlfriend Cassie sued him, accusing him of abuse, including beatings and rape. The lawsuit was settled the next day under undisclosed terms. Combs denied the accusations. Later that month, 2 more women accused Combs of sexual abuse in lawsuits. Dozens more lawsuits from both men and women followed. Combs denied them all. Federal agents searched Combs' houses in March the next year. CNN released a video in May of 2024 showing Combs attacking then-girlfriend Cassie in a Los Angeles hotel. He apologized for the assault on social media. Combs is arrested in Manhattan that September. A federal indictment accused him of using his power to coerce women into sexual performances. Jury selection for the trial began in May of 2025. The trial began a week later, including testimony from Cassie and rapper Kid Cudi. The jury began deliberating at the end of June, and they convicted Combs of 2 counts of a prostitution-related offense, but acquitted him of the higher-level racketeering and sex trafficking charges. A judge will determine his sentence.
He was found guilty of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution, but was found not guilty on the other charges, including racketeering, which would have carried a max sentence of life in prison. Here to expand a little bit more on that verdict from yesterday and what Diddy could be facing at his sentencing is 9 News legal expert Whitney Traylor back with us. Whitney, good morning.
Good morning.
Well, Whitney, as we just mentioned, Diddy was prosecuted convicted, on those prostitution charges that carry a maximum of 20 years, 10 years each. How much time is he likely to serve, though?
Well, he's definitely not going to get the maximum, and there is the federal sentencing guidelines that the judge has to essentially comply with, and based on his criminal record, his criminal history, it's likely going to be maybe 2 to 3 years. I know the prosecution is asking for, I think, up to 61 months. The defense is suggesting maybe 2 years. And you have to consider he's also going to have his time served. So he's been incarcerated for 9-10 months. The sentencing hearing is going to be in October. So by the time that happens, it's going to be a year. And on these charges, remember, there's no minimum. So he could literally just get probation. Whereas on the racketeering, on the serious charges, which he was found not guilty, there was a minimum of 15 years. So this is, when you look at the big picture, it's a slap on the wrist.
I want to go back and ask you a question that we asked you yesterday. As far as California goes, could these be served concurrently? Do they have to be served consecutively?
Right, that's up to the judge, and the judge will look at a number of different factors. They'll take into account the victim statements, his criminal history, all of his community ties, things like that. And so I think most experts are saying, yes, we're looking. I even heard an expert this morning that said, I think it'll be probation. I don't think that, but I think it will be on the lighter end. So maybe 2 years is probably what a lot of people are suggesting.
All right, interesting. Now, of course, the judge also ruled yesterday that he will remain in prison until that sentencing happens. Were you surprised by this?
Yeah, I really was surprised because he was facing some very serious charges that he was found not guilty on. And so the charges that he, essentially this was a prostitution charge, which is still a crime, it's still a felony, but not quite as serious. And his team actually proposed that he post $1 million bond, that he only travel within 4 states, he turn over his passport. I think his mother and his daughter's mother was also going to sign that bond. So it was a sort of an interesting proposal. And of course, the prosecution and other victims said, no, he's still terrorizing people. He's still not safe. And so the judge allows him to stay in, so I was a little surprised at that. But he has a few more months, and that will count towards his time served, toward whatever the sentence ultimately ends up being.
Okay, so talking about these 2 charges that he was convicted on, we've heard a lot of critics after yesterday's jurors came back with their verdict. A lot of angry people out there taking to social media who are outside the courthouse right there. What protections are there for these jurors who came to this decision now that they have to face the public?
Yeah, there's not necessarily a lot of protections for them. There's not much that the judge can do. Obviously, if somebody tries to commit crimes towards them, they can be prosecuted. But essentially, with the jury gets instructions, particularly while the trial was going on, regarding sequestration and not looking into it and that kind of thing. And judges different judges will, some judges allow jurors to go and talk. Some judges say you can't speak about it. In this case, and I think that's a disservice, as I was mentioning yesterday, because the lawyers actually benefit from that information.
Now, in this case, the judge didn't say that they couldn't talk, but he did discourage them from talking.
Right, that's right. And, you know, in these kind of high-profile cases, there's going to be a lot of pressure for people. They're going to be offered, you know, book deals or interviews and that kind of thing. And I think they're going to be able to. I didn't see the judge's order specifically, but I think it was just a discouragement, if you will.
Yeah. All right. Well, Whitney, thank you for coming back. We appreciate it.
We learned Sean Combs was denied being released from custody while he awaits sentencing. Today, the verdict came back. He was convicted of prostitution-related offenses. A jury acquitted him of sex trafficking and racketeering charges, which would have left him with a possible sentence of life in prison. The attorney representing his former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, who has shared emotional testimony, really difficult testimony, spoke after the verdict this morning.
The reaction is that we're pleased that he's finally been held responsible for 2 federal crimes, something that he's never faced in his life. He still faces substantial jail time. Of course, we would have liked to have seen a conviction on the sex crimes in RICO, but we understand beyond a reasonable doubt is a high standard.
Sentencing will now be held October 3rd. We'll continue our coverage with our 9 News legal analyst, Whitney Traylor. The jury came back. Well, yesterday we knew they were deadlocked, at least on the racketeering charge. They came back with this mixed verdict. Is that considered a victory for the defense or prosecution?
Oh, I think in this case, it's unquestionably a victory for the defense. I mean, when you, as you mentioned, what he was facing, potentially life with a minimum of a 15-year sentence on that racketeering and sex trafficking, the fact that he got out, even though these are still federal crimes, he could face up to 10 years on both of them on the maximum sentence, but we know he won't do that. It'll be a lesser time. This was a major victory, and it was really difficult because on the major charges, that one element of that is the coercion aspect, and the defense presented a plethora of text messages indicating that it wasn't coercion, that these ladies actually agreed to it. That was the evidence that was presented. With respect to the prostitution charge, all they had to show was that he paid folks, he brought folks from out of town into engage in these activities, and these male escorts testified that, yeah, we weren't coerced, we were paid thousands of dollars. So that prostitution charge was pretty easy to prove.
Well, it's interesting because the prosecution's case lasted for weeks, and then the defense, they didn't have that many witnesses. Sean Diddy Combs didn't testify in his own defense.
Right.
It was real kind of short and sweet. Do you feel like they knew there really wasn't a case? Those RICO charges were going to be hard to prove from the beginning.
Yeah, the RICO charges were going to be tough to prove, but the fact that the defense didn't produce any witnesses doesn't mean they were lackadaisical about it, because they had the opportunity to cross-examine. And, you know, when I do trials, my favorite part of the trial is cross-examination and closing. And the cross-examination, you know, most lawyers will say on direct, you want them to focus on the witness testifying. On cross, you actually want them to focus on you. It almost doesn't matter what the witness says. And so the fact that I think the prosecution called over 40 witnesses, and the defense was able to cross-examine each of them so that they didn't feel it was relevant to bring them back in their case in chief. And then, of course, Sean Combs not testifying. I'm not surprised at that at all, because you have a Fifth Amendment right to not self-incriminate. And a lot of times defendants don't want to testify because it can open the door. Cross-examination is brutal. Many times it can open the door to, if you've had any other kind of criminal history. And you have to remember the prosecution has the burden of proof. So it's, in some ways, and beyond a reasonable doubt, as that prosecutor just said, is a high burden to meet. And so when you're on the defense, you're really just picking at the prosecution's case. So I'm not surprised at that defense strategy. And obviously it worked, because he won on these major charges.
It worked.
Yeah.
Well, you look at the jury, what they've gone through for the last few months, what they've listened to alone, and then you also have somebody that's extremely well known sitting right there, and all his family, his mom was there every day, and I mean, that's human nature plays a role, I think, sometimes into this too, but Wow, that testimony from Cassie alone just was really compelling. So now, today they said, you got to stay in prison.
Yes. Now,
What does that mean?
So that means until his sentencing. So there was a hearing today that I think it actually may still be going on, but I do understand that the judge said, no, you can't be released. And so the defense was saying, hey, we'll post $1 million bond signed by him, his mother, I think one of his daughters, and they agreed to turn over the passport and only travel to 4 states. And the judge said no. And I thought, based on those charges, because he won on the more serious charges, I thought they would have actually said, yeah, he can get out, but no, he won't. So he's been in now for 10 months. The sentencing will be in October, so by the time he goes, he'll have already served a year, which will count towards his time. So he may only be facing 2 or 3 or 4 more years in jail.
Yeah, but it's not all over. We're getting a rap, but he's got 80 civil cases, so his
Yes.
legal troubles, and he was on his hands and knees praying and all that stuff, but he's still got an uphill battle, at least when it comes
On the
to
civil side,
yeah.
yes, years of litigation for sure.
Yeah, he'll be back in court.
Yes, yes,
All right, thank you, Whitney.
sure.